There are 15 million vacant homes in the United States, and somehow that is the magical fix for affordable housing. Flooding the market with those homes isn't going to make your rent cheaper or make it more accessible for you to be able to purchase them. If you think that's outrageous, you might be suffering from something I call affordable housing derangement syndrome. Let me show you why this logic falls apart and why some of the solutions that are out there don't really hold water.
30,000 Northeast Ohio vacant homes.
Vacant homes creating a nuisance for neighbors.
There are roughly 13,000 vacant homes in the city of Baltimore.
So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, why are they vacant in the first place? And there are 4 key reasons why a home is vacant or even labeled as vacant. It just means that for more than 6 months out of the year, someone is not living inside that house. It doesn't mean that it's vacant or abandoned and nobody's showing up to it. It could be something like a vacation home. Just think about all the snowbirds that come in from up north and go all the way down to Florida or even Arizona and Texas during the winter months. They live there about 6 months out of the year, and then they pop right back up in the summertime to their other home, which they live in for about 6 months. Those homes are now considered vacant in some of those states because they didn't live there for more than 6 months. Each state has a different rule when it comes to this, but that accounts for some of the 15 million. So even though it's technically vacant, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily something that needs to go onto the market now. You can't force people to sell something that they own and they're using it, even though it's labeled vacant. The second part of that vacancy rate are homes that are currently being flipped or within that foreclosure process. You may not know, but when you're in the foreclosure process, sometimes it can take months, even years before it ever enters into the open market. If the person or couple that is getting foreclosed on is in bankruptcy at that time, it can take even years on top of that. Throw a divorce in the mix, you're adding another couple years. So that 15 million homes is part of that vacancy number as well. Now let's talk about the flipped houses. Now, a lot of investors will buy a house and it will take them a very long time to get it completely finished and flipped. If it's been sold for more than 6 months and nobody has moved into that house, that's part of that vacancy rate. Eventually, they'll end up on the market. It doesn't mean they're completely vacant forever. It just means it's going to take them some time to get it fixed up to put it back on the market. Now, about 3 to 4 million homes are going through a process of being sold, resold, rented out, and then they end up vacant. It's currently on the market, it just doesn't have anybody living in it right now. It doesn't mean that it's just sitting there and not intended for somebody to live in at some point. So in actuality, there's probably about 10 million vacant homes. Now there's another pool of vacant homes, and it adds up to be about 5 million homes, and it's called the mystery bucket. No, I didn't make up that term. That mystery bucket consists of homeowners that have entered into assisted living and they still currently own their home. And then there's the homes that nobody wants to live in. Think about areas of Detroit that have a shrinking population. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes that are sitting there vacant. And that just adds to the number of vacant homes in the United States. But that doesn't mean that will help solve the affordability crisis now. It's a great thought, but it's just not there. And I think in some people's mind, they have this illusion that there's like 15 million homes spread evenly across the United States, and we could just sprinkle them all over the place. And that is just not how it works. I wish it did, but it's not how it works. And believe it or not, most vacant homes are not in the areas that you would think that would have the most vacant homes. Like in my brain, I was thinking, oh, probably New York has a lot of vacant homes, and even Detroit has a lot of vacant homes. But if you look at this chart right here from usfacts.org, this tells you exactly where the vacant housing is. And it isn't in New York. It's just not.
Believe it or not.
We're talking Alaska, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. Now, we do have quite a bit in Florida, but of course, just like I said, where do the snowbirds go whenever they're trying to get warm? They go to Florida. That's why the vacancy rate is so high. Do you know where they're probably coming from? Maine. That's why their vacancy rate is so high. So the thought process of those 15 million homes solving the affordability crisis is kind of deranged, let's be honest. The amount of vacancies that we need in the locations that we need them are not even in the right spots. So if we were to dump those all on the market now, all that would do is affect Maine, New Hampshire, and Florida. Oh, and parts of Alaska.
Going to begin enforcing a new law that regulates Airbnb rentals in New York. Some say it could amount to an effective ban on short-term rentals.
So here's something interesting. Spain just now stopped 66 1,000 homes from being used as Airbnbs. And they say it's going to help for their affordability crisis. If we stopped Airbnb, we're going to make housing more affordable. In the United States, we have 2.25 million Airbnbs. And even though it worked for Spain, would it necessarily work for the United States? Not so fast. And some people have gotten really excited about these numbers because they are seeing that there's all these headlines that the Airbnb business is collapsing. I don't know anything about Airbnbs, but I can tell you those 2.25 million homes are not going to make a dent in the affordability crisis. And let me explain why. Just because it's an Airbnb does not make it a livable, long-term living use type of home. If you notice, there's many, many people that use Airbnb to list their tiny homes, their garages, their apartments above their houses, things that they couldn't normally use for long-term, even rentals. Many people don't mind when they're on a vacation if they're staying in somebody's above their garage and they have to like walk downstairs to use the bathroom, that kind of thing. I have a friend who lists all his tiny homes. None of those tiny homes have bathrooms inside. You actually have to go to a community bathroom in order to use the showers in the bathroom.
And only a little bit gross.
Those are not going to be something that you would list for even rent or for sale. You also have to remember that a lot of these Airbnbs are heavily concentrated in like vacation areas that people don't necessarily visit year round or people live in year round. It's really hopping and popping during the spring and summer months. But in the winter months, that place is like a ghost town. So even if you were to put a lot of those houses on the market and take them off of Airbnb, it wouldn't really necessarily help the market that much. I do have to laugh because about 2 years ago, somebody put out a TikTok saying that because the Airbnb market was going to crash, it was going to cause all home prices to decline by 25%. No. Sorry that ain't happening.
In January, 33% of all homes purchased in the U.S. were bought by investors, often Wall Street-backed companies with multi-billion-dollar funds.
Did you know that like corporate investors make up for about 560,000 homes in the United States that they own? But that doesn't include hedge funds that own about 687,000 houses across the United States. So that only accounts for about 1 million. And those are the only ones that they report. Invitation Homes happens to own just over 80,000 homes, but that is the same number they have been saying that they've owned since 2016. I would gather since 2016 they have acquired more than 80,000 homes, but that's all they ever report in all these news articles. While I do think that the problem with corporate investing is still a huge problem because they keep scooping up as many homes as possible. They scoop them up in specific areas. So in those cities, they find the most affordable areas and they scoop up the whole entire neighborhood so they can dictate the price of rentals. They can dictate the price of what goes up for sale, and they conclude with other markets to make sure that they keep in with the rent in the area. And that is still happening, and it's been happening in all the major cities. They may not be reporting everything they own. I still think it's a major issue. And if they were to sell all of their houses at one time, who would that actually help? It's only going to be pockets in certain areas that they own that's going to really be affected with an influx of listings that ended up on the market. Most of the corporate in hedge fund investing has been through the Sun Belt in the last 10 years. That, of course, increased during the last housing boom that we had. And of course, they made a huge dent in the affordable stockpile of homes in places like Atlanta, Austin, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona, some areas in Florida. And they're not going to let go of those homes anytime soon. Now, I agree that we need to stop them.
Must be stopped. Must be stopped.
But all of the attempts to stop corporate investing has gone absolutely nowhere. They have made many bills out there. Plenty of senators have proposed bills, and they just sit on Capitol Hill, never to be voted on. And we know how politicians get elected. So they make these promises they're going to do all these things during their election campaigns. They even say, look, we made this bill to stop corporate investing because they're ruining America, in hopes that you won't notice that that bill never gets voted on. Some of those bills have been sitting there for the last 4 years. Who's going to bring that up on the House floor, especially when their elections have been paid for by the same people that are buying up all these houses? It's called lobbying. We need to stop that in order for a lot of these things to happen. Now, locally, we can do something a little bit more. That's where the rubber really meets the road. If you want corporate investing to stop in your local area, that's when you go to those meetings. You can go as small as your local HOAs in your area to put a cap on how many homes in your neighborhood could be bought and sold by corporations, LLCs, as S corps. And you also can put a covenant in there that says you can't have X amount of rental properties in your neighborhood as well. So that's on the smallest level. But even on your local levels, you can start going to your planning and zoning meetings and start asking them to put caps that way. I want to add one more layer when it comes to corporate investors, because they are truly evil. And what they have been doing across the United States is they've been buying up mobile home parks, and they're buying them up in your local area. So what happens is the most affordable housing options for most people, we're talking the elderly, people on fixed incomes, people with disabilities, people just buying their very first home, are getting kicked out of mobile home parks because they are being bought out by corporate investors. This is one of those situations that you can get involved in your local area. This is one of those times you call your local senators, you call your local governor's office, and you try to stop them on that level. Because if we can save those people's housing, you're going to have a lot less of a homelessness problem in your area. These corporate investors that have been buying up these mobile home parks, they're raising the rent so incredibly high. These people are making a decision if whether they should take their medications that have been prescribed to them in order to afford that or pay their rent. And they're deciding, well, I'll just cut my medication in half and I'll go ahead and try to pay my rent. And now that they've raised them so incredibly high, they have no choice but to move out of it. And a lot of times they owned the house that was in that manufactured home park, but they can't afford to move it. I guarantee in your state, if you just type in anywhere on Google, mobile home park being shut down, mobile home park being dismantled, mobile home park residents being evicted, it's all because of corporate investors. They want the land and they want those people out. But this is one of those times that you can make a stink and stop them from doing something like this. That's where you're going to make the biggest impact. On the federal level, they're never going to stop it. I mean, they're just not. But these little small local elections, it's more likely that something could happen in a positive direction to not allow so many corporate investors in your area. So on paper, yes, stop corporate investing. Of course, we all want to do that. We also want world peace. But on a local level, that's where you're going to have the most success. We can't stop corporate investing from buying houses. We can't force them to sell all those houses. And if we did, it wouldn't necessarily make a big difference in your backyard. The biggest difference is going to be you in your backyard voting on those things. I know everybody tells you to vote, and I know it's like, ugh. But most people don't vote in local elections. They only vote for the big elections. Now, I know you've heard it from me, and you probably have thought this yourself, but what about all those vacant office buildings? Why can't they turn those into affordable housing? Well, I actually saw a 60 Minutes special, and it made perfect sense why it doesn't necessarily work in all situations.
Gets us to a second set of obstacles, which are financial obstacles, right? Does the math work out? We're not talking about creating affordable housing. If you want to create affordable housing, then rents are naturally going to be lower. And so the math typically does not work out anymore.
It all comes down to cost. And in order to retrofit a whole entire office building and make them into apartments that people can live in full-time year-round, it's going to take them a lot of time and money to make it so it is a livable space for lots of apartments. And by the time they get done, it is no longer affordable. So they end up being luxury apartments. This could actually work in a way, because what happens is when people are moving up, they go out of their smaller apartments to get into bigger apartments, making those smaller apartments so people can move into that apartment, the one that they're vacating, while the move up buyer goes into those luxury apartments that were once office buildings. More supply on the market is definitely going to help with the housing supply all the way across the board, especially in congested cities. Not many developers, though, want to take on this project. They find it to be too risky. Not a lot of banks want to fund these types of projects because, again, they find it a little risky. So it is possible that it could help the affordability crisis. It isn't necessarily the ultimate solution. 3 words: national rent control. People talk about this all the time. We would make a national rent cap that people couldn't increase the rent by X amount of percentage every single year. On the surface, that sounds really good. But for landlords, of course, they're going to fight tooth and nail on it. And you're thinking, well, they're just greedy. Not all landlords are greedy. Most landlords only own a couple houses. And as taxes and insurance increase, a lot of times it's going to be a lot more than that 2-3% every single year. Here in Louisiana, our insurance went up double from the year before. And our taxes have increased as home prices have increased. And a lot of investors don't own the investment properties outright. They own a mortgage on it as well. So you're punishing people that are just small time investors that are trying to supplement their incomes. And I know a lot of people are like, well, those poor babies, they should have those houses available for people to purchase instead of rent. Not every person wants to be a renter. Not everybody wants to be a homeowner. So having available rental units is very feasible for every single situation. I'm not saying flood the market with rentals, absolutely not. But to say all houses need to be for sale and none of them need to be for rent, that's kind of silly too. Now, the only way to get us out of this problem is to build our way out of it. And we can't build fast enough if we keep doing it the traditional way. And I will scream from the rooftops till anybody will listen to me. We can do this very quickly because they did it after World War II. And that is by using modular construction. All of those houses, pretty much the same exact house, built in a factory, one right after another. They would be in perfect weather conditions, so they wouldn't be exposed to the elements. You wouldn't have to worry about mold intrusion because they're just being built, put on a truck, and then connected together. You could also do that with mobile home construction as well, but a lot of people aren't going to be in on the idea of wanting to live in a mobile home. People are opening up to it more and more. The market pretty much dictates that they do want a traditional style house. And with modular construction, they could do that. They could have a traditional style house, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, one right after another, one small driveway going up the hill, just like they used to do after World War II. Plenty of communities were done this way. What if you did those communities with a special interest rate that the government could subsidize, just so we got more and more people into those houses? Sounds like a good plan. Maybe a politician should write a bill for that. You could even incentivize home builders to do it to get more supply of the homes on the market. That's the way to do it. You could build them faster. You could offer incentives to the builders to make it done faster. You could cut some of the red tape to allow for more affordable housing in your area. And then on top of it all, you could offer a low introductory interest rate for people to buy one of these homes. Genius. They've done it before. It's not that hard. If they could do it after World War II, they can do it again. At that time, it was the VA loan, but maybe they could call it the FT loan, the first time home buyer loan, just for those specific modular home communities. I bet you it would work. You let me know in the comments section if you would buy a small 2-bedroom, 1-bath house with a low interest 30-year fixed rate mortgage. If not, that's fine too. You let me know in the comment section if you think that's a stupid idea. It's no skin off my nose. I love to hear all the opinions. To watch more videos about the affordability crisis here in the United States, you're going to want to watch these videos right here. My name is Kristina Smallhorn, your real estate whisperer, and I tell you all this because everybody deserves an affordable home.